Good evening. Trump news at a glance. President gives his loyal enforcer the boot. What if I told you this wasn't just another firing inside Washington, but a calculated move in a much larger power play? What if removing a so-called loyal enforcer wasn't about failure at all, but about timing, leverage, and control at the highest level of global strategy? Because when you zoom out and really analyze what's unfolding right now in the United States, the patterns don't look random anymore. They start to feel coordinated, almost engineered. Let me walk you through this step by step, because once you see the sequence clearly, it becomes very difficult to ignore what might actually be happening behind the scenes. Over the last 48 to 72 hours, one of the most unexpected moves from President Donald Trump's administration has been the sudden removal of a key legal power figure, someone widely viewed as his most loyal and aggressive enforcer within the system. This wasn't just a normal reshuffle. This wasn't routine politics. This was someone deeply embedded in high-stakes legal battles, politically sensitive investigations, and strategic enforcement actions that shaped narratives not only inside the United States, but across the global stage. Now here's where it starts getting interesting. The timing of this decision, early April 2026, is extremely critical. This is not happening in isolation. At the exact same moment, the United States is under pressure from multiple directions. Financial markets are showing volatility, geopolitical tensions with Iran are escalating fast, NATO alliances are under visible strain, and global investors are watching every signal coming out of Washington. When a leader removes a trusted insider during a moment like this, it usually doesn't signal chaos, it signals a shift in strategy. Think about the sequence carefully. On March 28th, tensions in the Middle East intensified sharply, leading to a surge in oil prices that jumped nearly 8% within days. By March 30th and March 31st, global markets began reacting, with increased volatility spreading across equities, commodities, and currencies. By April 1st, the S&P 500 had dropped around 2 to 3%, reflecting uncertainty among investors who were trying to understand whether this escalation would turn into a larger conflict. At the same time, internal disagreements inside the administration began surfacing, particularly around how certain high-profile legal matters were being handled. These weren't just legal cases, they were politically explosive files with international implications. And then suddenly, right at the peak of this tension, the decision is made. The enforcer is removed. But it gets deeper than that. When a president removes someone known for being loyal and aggressive, especially someone who executed controversial policies without hesitation, it sends a layered signal. To the public, it looks like internal conflict. To critics, it looks like weakness. But to allies, investors, and geopolitical competitors, it signals something very different. It signals flexibility, recalibration, and possibly a reset. It's like saying without saying it directly, the strategy is changing. Now let's connect the dots further. At the same time this internal shift is happening, discussions around NATO commitments are intensifying behind closed doors. Trump has repeatedly hinted at reducing U.S. involvement in NATO, something that would completely reshape the security architecture of Europe. Countries like Germany are already reacting, increasing defense spending by tens of billions of euros, preparing for a scenario where American military support becomes less predictable. France is also pushing for greater European strategic autonomy. Why does this matter in this context? Because removing a hardline legal enforcer creates space for diplomatic repositioning. It allows the administration to adjust tone, adjust approach, and enter negotiations with a different posture, all without changing the core objectives. It's a classic high-level negotiation tactic. Change the visible layer while protecting the underlying strategy. Now think about the financial side of this equation, because this is where things get even more revealing. Whenever uncertainty rises, certain sectors benefit. Defense companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon have already seen gains between 4 to 7% in recent trading sessions. Oil prices crossing above $85 per barrel are boosting energy giants like ExxonMobil and Chevron. Meanwhile, safe haven assets like the US dollar and Treasury bonds are seeing increased demand. So, who benefits financially from this situation? Not just corporations, but also institutional investors who understand how geopolitical tension translates into market opportunity. Volatility is not always a risk. It can be an asset for those who are positioned correctly. And this is where the concept of leverage becomes critical. By removing a key enforcer, Trump isn't just making a personnel change. He is resetting internal leverage dynamics. New leadership means new interpretations of legal frameworks, new priorities, and potentially new outcomes in ongoing cases. Political opponents who were preparing for one type of strategy now have to rethink everything. International actors who were anticipating a certain level of rigidity now face uncertainty. And uncertainty itself becomes a powerful tool. At the same time, this move sends signals globally. To Iran, it may suggest a potential recalibration, possibly opening doors for indirect negotiation or controlled escalation. To China, it reinforces the idea that U.S. policy can shift rapidly, making long-term strategic planning more complex. To Russia, it highlights the unpredictable nature of American decision-making, which can be both a risk and an opportunity, depending on how it is interpreted. Now let's project forward, because the next 3 to 6 months are going to be extremely important. There are key deadlines approaching. The NATO mid-year review in June 2026 is one of them. Trade negotiations with major partners are another. There are also domestic political milestones that will influence how these decisions are perceived internally. Entering these moments with a newly adjusted internal structure changes the entire negotiation dynamic. Imagine sitting across the table from a country that just replaced its most aggressive legal strategist. You don't know whether the next move will be softer, harder, or completely unexpected. That unpredictability alone creates leverage. And here's the question that should really make you think. Was this decision reactive? Or was it planned weeks in advance? Because if you trace the timeline, the signals were already there. Market movements, geopolitical tension, internal disagreements, all aligning toward a moment where a decisive action would have maximum impact. Early April becomes that moment. Perfect timing. Not too early to seem impulsive, not too late to lose strategic advantage. Right in the middle of all this, if you're paying close attention, this is exactly the kind of deep analysis you'll find on ANC News, where we don't just report events, we break down the strategy behind them and connect the dots that most people miss. Now let's go even deeper into the power dynamics at play. Modern geopolitics is not just about military strength or economic size. It's about narrative control, timing, and perception management. By making a dramatic internal move, the administration shifts the media narrative. Instead of focusing entirely on external conflicts, attention shifts inward. This buys time. It creates space. It allows strategic moves to happen without constant external pressure. And time, in high-stakes geopolitics, is one of the most valuable resources. Meanwhile, global players are watching carefully. China, facing economic slowdown and internal structural challenges, is analyzing whether U.S. instability creates opportunities in Asia-Pacific. Russia is monitoring NATO cohesion, looking for signs of fragmentation. Iran is calculating whether to escalate tensions further or wait for a potential diplomatic opening. Every move triggers a reaction. Every reaction creates a new layer of strategy. And then there's the domestic political angle. Even when elections are not immediately around the corner, every major decision shapes public perception. Removing a controversial figure can appeal to moderate voters, while maintaining overall policy direction keeps the core base aligned. It's a delicate balance, And timing, once again, is everything. But it doesn't stop there. Legal implications are also massive. Ongoing cases tied to this removed enforcer could now shift direction. Delays, reinterpretations, even quiet closures are possible. Each of these outcomes carries political consequences, not just within the United States, but internationally as well. Think about that for a second. A single decision affecting legal systems, financial markets, diplomatic negotiations, and military positioning, all at the same time. Now bring it back to the core question. Is this chaos or is this control? Because from one angle, it looks unstable. Sudden removal, rising tensions, volatile markets. But from another angle, it looks like a calculated reset designed to reposition the United States across multiple fronts simultaneously. And if it is a reset, then what comes next becomes even more important than what just happened. Watch the next appointments carefully. Watch how quickly replacements are confirmed. Watch the tone of official statements. Does it become more aggressive or more diplomatic? These are signals. These are indicators of strategic direction. Also, keep an eye on the markets. If defense stocks continue to rise while broader indices struggle, it suggests expectations of prolonged tension. If oil prices stabilize, it may indicate controlled escalation rather than full-scale conflict. Every movement in the market is telling part of the story. And don't ignore international reactions. NATO leaders, Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, every statement matters. Every response reveals something about how this move is being interpreted globally. Because in geopolitics, nothing happens in isolation. Every decision is connected. Every action is part of a larger game. And right now, that game is entering a new phase. As we move toward mid-2026, the stakes are only getting higher. Trade deals, military alignments, economic pressures, all converging at a moment where even small decisions can have massive global consequences. So the real question is not just why this happened. The real question is what this is setting up next. Because if this was planned, then it's just the opening move of a much bigger strategy. And if it wasn't planned, then the risks are even greater because it suggests instability at the highest level of power. Either way, one thing is absolutely clear. This story is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. And if you want to stay ahead of these developments, make sure you're following platforms like ANC News, because this is where complex geopolitical events are broken down into clear strategic insights that actually help you understand what's coming next. Because the reality is simple. The geopolitical chessboard is shifting. Pieces are being repositioned. Strategies are evolving. And the next few moves could redefine global power dynamics for years to come. This is not the conclusion of a story. This is the start of a new chapter. A chapter where timing, leverage, and perception will decide outcomes that impact the entire world. And as always, ANC News will continue tracking every development, every signal, and every move in this unfolding global chess match. Because what we are witnessing right now is only the beginning, and the real game has just begun. That's enough for today. Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.